Hey all, this is Jake Davis and I'll be continuing on from last week's stream, if Maya doesn't have a heart attack. So what we left off last week was doing the blockouts for this. So just getting him jumping around, all of that, and then running up here. So since then I've done a very mild pass of just tidying up some keyframes and basically just making sure that all the key poses are right for it to continue on. On top of that, I did a little bit of work in Studio Library, just working out some bits and bobs. So got a little Thor run cycle going, as you can see in the little corner. Nothing thrilling, you know, only worked on it for about an hour, but I'll show you how to do that later on. It's just a little quick demo of like how to use Studio Library, because I'll be using that cycle quite a few times during this, but we'll continue on and start adding in all of the cycles to where they should be and go from there. I've also added the MacGuffin of Thor's hammer up here, so we'll be having him grab that as he runs past. And at the bottom you might notice I've got an extra toolbar. So this is an Animbot, which will allow me to just keep track of some curves and stuff. Like this, so it'll allow me to show off the spacing between all of the movements. I tend to use spacing temperature for this, partly because it allows me to see how fast something's moving within screen space. Red is obviously faster and blue is cooler or slower. And because this cycle's just going to be running on the spot, I'll be moving it manually and hopefully getting the timing right. Also means that I'll be moving out of step for all of this, because I'm no longer working within the span of a couple of keys. I'm working within, you know, the minute little details. This is where having an Animbot is really useful for some of these tools, because I can figure out where my foot strikes are and see if I'm actually taking advantage of them correctly. So say my character's actually moving within and not sliding along the floor. And because I'm doing this a slightly dirty way, that this is more mandatory. Normally what I do is a little offset group. Actually even gives me the little pinpoint of where things should be lining up. So I'm going to just smash those together. There's very little in movement. key because it's irrelevant. But I'll mostly be using linear opposed to spline because I want that action to read like he's actually running along it. And once I've kind of figured out that speed, I can also use that as a guide to match up the movement from that point onwards. So roughly that should mean that I'm getting extra steps in the right spot. What I'm doing there is I'm right clicking an insert key. Just gives me a little bit of extra control. That might be one. I'm getting some variance in where these are lining up, mostly because of my global being in a weird position. If you wanted to get something similar to this motion path, you can also use under animation settings, visualize, and then either ghosting or there's a motion trail. Both of those give very similar results. It's just this is in a singular button. I'm just manually keying all of these at the moment. So probably going to grab these rotational values and just level these up. As well as these translates. So all at the moment I'm focusing on is the translate Z. What I might also do at this moment is zero out anything in here that shouldn't be rotated. Which is most likely going to be rotate Y in this case. Partly due to the speed of this cycle, I might also reduce it, because it is very much going at a pretty fast pace, especially after that landing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab these keys, on through here, just drag them out. Another way to drag them out will be selecting in the graph editor and going up into here and just drag them out this way. Yeah, sorry about that. I was getting asked a question. What am I doing at the moment? At the moment, I'm just doing a body mechanics exercise for a demo, just to give people an idea of how 3D animation works. So I've got this idea out here. I have a beautiful little diagram I can bring up. So what I'm planning on doing is I'm having this Thor rig character move through, do a little jump up through here with some lightning, run across, do another jump over a little gap in a bridge, and then just run off screen. So what I've done in the previous episode was just the block out for this, which was just kind of going through and making, you know, all the key poses for the character. Now I'm just making sure that I've got, you know, everything where I want it to be, and I'm going to start adding the cycles to all of the key elements where the character is going to be moving through. So I'm just trying to get the difficult areas, which would be the start and end. I'm also just doing a little retime of the run cycle because it's slightly fast for the area that we're in. This little section will probably require quite a bit of retiming, just to make it fit within the scene. It's a useful skill understanding how to blend cycles within animation, because it can save you some time in the long run, especially if you're doing repetitive motion. There's a good chance I'll be doing most of this animation on 2s, so I'll be getting everything kind of blocked out to where it needs to be, and then I'll do a bake and then tidy up even more but that will be later on when I do a polish pass. Hopefully in the next episode, the episode after that. Depending on how much we get through today. I'll also have to do some blending with all of these cycles. So I'll have to have a animation blend to see how we can get him from a crouch position into a running position. Which is most likely just going to be grabbing dominant feet, etc. What I also have to do is a snap, because all my keys are now on sub keys, because I manually stretched it. So I'm probably going to leave this a little bit rough, because he has to get into, I think that's probably the pose that I'll lead him from. So if I get that to here, just putting another keyframe down for the main controller. To take advantage of me already having keys, I can just use those up and down to move him within the world space. Because what I'm trying to do now is just make this a nice linear movement. I'm trying to avoid having that really awkward position on that foot. So I'll probably move him that way a little bit more. Making sure your character feels like they're moving within the environment is very important. I'll probably most likely just work within linear and stepped at this moment. We'll start doing spline stuff a little bit later on. And then we'll drop it back down to stepped once we bake out some keyframes to achieve the working on twos effect. I'm just going to be looking at the motion through this section more so than where the keyframing is. Specifically, I'm going to adjust my time range so I'm not playing through the whole thing. It'll still keep the start and end frames, but I'm just moving within the section just to cordon it off. More interested in just that first step, so I can cut this back down a little bit more. Now I can just play palace through this. Obviously that last bit is going a little bit too fast. Which is just me adjusting the translate Z value a little bit more. A little bit closer in line with what the other one is. I kind of want this first step to be a little bit slower than the second step, because he's building up momentum again. Also want to try to get rid of all the subframes that are on this at the moment, which you can do by going curves, edit, there we go, and then snap, and that will just snap them all back to non-subframes. I think I'm still going to probably mess around with the timing of the cycle just a little bit more, just because at the moment I'm really not feeling it's the right pace, because it holds for 4 frames, which is almost double what I had originally. And it works quite well for that first bit in through here when he first contacts, but the subsequent, the next couple of steps should be a little bit faster. We can also drag that back out just to see if that's going to look okay. And that's a little bit closer to how it looked like. So we're just going to put those back on snap. Make sure they're all sitting on correct keyframes instead of being on sub keys. Also probably just going to grab that key and just grab all these and delete them. Using the global, I'm able to actually just see if it's actually going to be contacting the floor correctly. So I'm just going to make sure it's actually all the way in there. Having to do a little bit more adjustment than I would have liked because of this land. So I'm actually going to just take this advantage to get the rotation of values from the end. They should be more or less correct. Hopefully it should just make this process like he's actually running along the correct spot. Only because of the rotation values. Next thing I'm going to do is actually going to grab all of the keyframes for the Thori. Just like this. Yep. And because I know what frame he starts his cycle, which is here. I'm just going to grab all of those. Copy them. And just paste. After deleting all the extra keys. So not perfect, but definitely doing the right things now. Probably just gonna leave that for now and then start blocking out another area which needs a cycle. Because I kind of like the pacing of that one at the moment, I am actually just going to steal it because we've already got the keyframes here. What I'm doing at the moment is deselecting the global because I don't need any of that animation. I just need the bottom stuff. Now you can either do that through the timeline or through the graph editor. Both do exactly the same thing, they're just different points in time. And during this, I'm also going to go minus a little bit, so I'm just going to go down to 800. This means that when I paste the keyframes in, it's not going to start deleting keys that are already up there, and should hopefully just blend together. Just double check that's all worked correctly. Yep. And because he's coming into full sprint, I can also shorten this up a little bit more. I've been meaning to watch it. A lot of people in the office have been recommending it, and it's on my to-watch list because the animation looks phenomenal. There's a couple of scenes that were being used around this reference as well because of the snappiness that we're trying to hit for some of the stuff that we're doing internally. Specifically, it's the flat scene at the end. There's something a bit funky going on here. Normally, some of these keys are just moving in a way that I'm not expecting. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, it was extending some of the keys that weren't existing. So right there, normally what you can do is you can right click copy keys and then paste it next to it, and normally it works. But if you're having issues with that and it's not working, try doing it through the graph editor. Both have the same result, but Maya sometimes, depending on the rig, does not like having one or the other. So sometimes just taking advantage of the tools is important. Just do a little bit of house cleaning for some of these keys. It does seem some of these keys have walked out for some reason. Just making sure everything's stepped, just for a second. Yeah, something... Maya does have issues sometimes with when you do use things like Studio Library, because it will try to use the default time opposed to recent or set, so whatever you're hovering over. And it does appear at that moment it did use the recent instead of from selection. You can just reset it if you do, like just Control Z a couple of times and then go from there. It will delete all the actions that do happen. I might just do it as a replace instead of insert, because replace will always replace the keys that it's actually overriding. That appears to be working correctly now. Yeah, it does appear this rig does not like having keys copied and pasted, specifically from the timeline. So you'll have to use the graph editor if you are following along. Maya is having a moment right now, so hopefully it won't crash. We're all good. It's always good to just save if you are starting to have issues, especially with Maya, because it does have a tendency to crash if you are not paying attention, or if you're overloading it with operations. And Maya does tend to crash if you are moving a lot of keys. Motion capture data does tend to have that issue if you are copying and pasting keys, because it's very rich information. It does appear it has crashed on me at this moment. Yeah, the crashing meme is very accurate, and I think you saying that has definitely caused it to crash. Good old Maya. Yep. That's one dead Maya, so we will have to just do a quick little restart of Maya here. What's worse with Maya is if it actually crashes and it's not a proper hard crash, is you don't get the fatal error. And fatal errors you can recover from, but when it just seizes, unfortunately you do lose everything. You're just in time for me to recover from a crash, unfortunately. those that are just joining in, the whole point of this is to do a little anim that's basically just going through this environment. Let's just play that back in real time. So last week I just did the block in, and this week I'm going to start adding animation cycles to it. Given that Maya has remembered all my preferences. Yeah, it definitely seems that 2022 has had some issues with some of the animation plugins that I'd normally use. And it seems that it's forgotten entirely. So I will have to quickly do a drag in of some of them. Did keep a animation checkpoint, so let's see. So Animbot has a anim check-in or checkup, like, so it does auto saves, which in this case might just save it. Where Maya's autosave does have a tendency to crash, so especially when you're using the graph editor and you're trying to move something when Maya decides it wants to do an autosave. So if we're lucky, Animbot would have done a good old save and backed up all the anim data that we've already moved around. Yeah, I was the guest speaker for one of the first year classes. It was right at the very end when I was talking about it. The tunes are definitely fantastic on this. Let's just double check what's saved. Oh, wonderful. So Animbot just saved me from a really bad crash. So I'm going to take this advantage to save. Yeah, it's very fortunate that I have that. I really dislike it with Maya's crashability without fatal errors. Because we're using references, it's not as taxing as it could be. So the file size itself, if I don't remove my shelf, is actually rather small. We're talking only like 5,000 kilobytes, which isn't very bad. Where each of the rigs, if you import it, starts adding up like 70,000 kilobytes, or I think the Thor rig itself is like 46. So using references does reduce the amount of tax that's actually in your Maya scenes. But you could run most of the Maya software off something that's only got like 16 gigs of RAM and a pretty simple processor. I'm going to keep that keyframe there, but I am going to just start. Yup. Wonderful. No, you don't. I know I don't need that keyframe that's there that urgently. Just need this one up here. Wonderful. So now I'm just going to go back to just getting that initial block in of the cycle starts around here. So I'm just going to throw him back roughly where I want him. Bop, bop. So a lot of this will look a little bit janky until you start doing like a polishing pass. And that's mostly because it looks worse before it gets better. Now that I also know that my start range is correct and everything's in the right spot, I can also change this back to where it was previously. And it's also going to run a little bit slow because it's doing like a cache pass. And the more keys you have, the more it's going to be doing caching. Now these run cycles are already really slow in comparison, but I am going to start cutting keys out of them and tidying them up. I tend to do these tidy passes in intermediate steps. Like, I know I need this bit to be a little bit slower than the start, so I might be like, okay, I'll grab all of these keys and just give them a little bit of a squish. And then snap them back so they're actually a little bit closer to where they need to be. Double check on the graph editor, making sure there's no other keys that I've missed, which I have. So I can just start dragging those along. I also probably won't animate too much within 8 of either side, just so I'm staying out of the handles. Which just act as an extra little buffer for rendering and everything else. What I'll also do when I start getting further into this is come up with some really interesting cameras that we can use to showcase, you know, the motions that are happening. So maybe I choose an angle that's a little bit higher and go to flatter the animation that I'm working on opposed to working against it. There's some sections like up here where I might only grab 4 or 5 frames out of the cycle. So I might only just be like the first step, second step, then jump, opposed to trying to do the full cycle in through this bit. one thing to note is the more that I speed up this cycle, the further he's actually running, so I will eventually have to just extend out how far he's running. Just to avoid slide like that. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect at this stage, because it is just getting the block out still. This is a part of the process of figuring out what's going to work for your scenes. And if you understand how cycles work, you can start to tidy up certain elements that you actually notice. Normally when I do a cycle, I will use an offset group, like this one for example, to keep it on the spot, and use that as a timing guide, which I might show on another screen eventually. But I tried to get this cycle done very quickly so we could work with it today. As it is, the timing isn't too bad. Thing is, I would like it so this part of the cycle is where I come into a contact. So I'm just using F to zoom in on that section. But I would like this foot to line up with this here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these last couple of keys for this cycle, so about here is where I want it, on that contact. Go grab this one and this one, just get rid of them. Also get rid of that key, because that's irrelevant. Get rid of those as well. Just put an S to key it all. I'll key all of that as well. I'll just drag all of this over. Because we know we want this to be lining up a little bit more, what I can do is grab that key, copy it over, paste it over here as well. So that should line up the feet just a little bit closer, and just give it a little bit more life like that. Doesn't have to be perfect at this stage. All we're doing is trying to get everything roughly lined up. Because what you can do is over a couple of frames, especially when you're using stepped and using twos, you get to hide a little bit more while still keeping the appeal of the character movement. And I might just focus on this front end today just to really demonstrate that. I'm also going to turn back on the motion trail, just so I can keep track of this foot. I'm just going to be using the main controller for this section just to line up the center of where it should be. Because I want the weight to kind of feel like it transfers through this foot. What I'm also going to do is snap this, put this back onto stepped. Just because it minimizes the amount of sliding that I'm having to deal with. It just makes the actions a little bit clearer. Basically all I'm doing is trying to line these two dots up. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just has to read like those motions might lead together. What I'm going to do, because I do like those first couple of steps and they do kind of line up where they need to be, not perfectly but close enough, is just push it a little bit closer so they are trying to almost line up, and then I'm going to do a animation bake because that will help reduce the amount of stuff that I have to do later on. I could show you how animation baking works. The timing does seem like it's almost there. Just needs a little bit of love. Basically all I'm doing is looking at the footfolds to see where they line up on screen. And they're getting close to where they need to be. So I'm just going to keep moving this up and down until it's almost feeling like we're getting very minimal slide. And it won't help that this is going at on 2s for some of it, and then others aren't. So what I will do is also grab all this and put it on auto. Oh, sure. Because that foot's moving faster, should give me an inkling that my timing is too slow now. That's pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. I think I'll just stick with that for now. Because I know where the start and end of my loop is as well, I'm just gonna get a little copy, a little paste. Also know that those lot of keys is going to be irrelevant because they're not the same as the other one on that side. Because they are also the same key, I can grab that, delete that lot of keys. Might have also only just grabbed half of the loop instead of the full loop. That will do for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select all of these keys up to the squat. I'm just going to go curves, file, edit keys, bake simulation. And then because I want to do this on animation by twos, I'm just going to hit 2 on this. And also go to start and end because I only want this to do select number of frames. Because I know where I want it to end. And I want it to stop right on that frame. 47. Cool. And then you just go bake keys. You'll do a little run through. And it'll even out these keys down here. And because I'm doing this on twos, instead of just needing every key on a 2, you also change it to a stepped. Then it's only running through half the number of keys. And you can take that to your advantage because we know we want those to blend together. I know my footfalls are roughly right. Not perfect, but roughly. So, because I know I need to blend between that key and this key, and start adding some in-betweens. So I'm just going to drag this key 2 over. Go into my graph editor. I'm going to do a little sneaky spline on those 2. Because they should, theoretically, be somewhere in between them. There should be a nice little blend. Like that key right there would be a nice little blend between the 2. So I'm just going to right click, insert key, select them all again, keys and stepped. As you can see, the feet motion is mostly correct. The hip, not so much, but I can start blending between these processes, or between these 2 keys. Take advantage of Animbot here just to have a look at my curve. I can also start adding some mild anticipation to this because I know that the characters where they're going and I want to keep this arc nice and direct. Because they're also, the character would also be aware of where they're heading, they can also start doing some actions preemptively. Because we know that's the midpoint as well, take advantage by going closer to the end point, which helps sell the action a little bit more. All I'm doing now is just making sure that everything's lining up within those keys, because at the moment we have just an odd section where they're linked together, which doesn't quite work how it should. I'm just going to put that in spline for a second just to... So what this has done is it's put out the correct value, but it's not keeping track of the Y value correctly. Just double checking everything's lining up where it should be. Make sure I haven't got any errand keys on anything that isn't a 2. Also got to adjust some of this spine through his back, because I really don't like how far he's hunched over. I'll be doing that through the rotate value. I do want him to start hunching in through this section though, so I will start like just shifting some keys around. Also want to try to avoid him feeling like he's just taking a squat, opposed to like getting into that action a little bit early. So I will now move my motion path onto his hips, because that will help give me an idea of where everything's sitting. Still be mostly using this controller up here, but the hips will be more accurate to where his actual hip line will be. I'm not going to worry too much about the hands or anything else at this moment either. Because that can all come with just a little bit of extra tweaking and curve management. Now what I might do is also just force him into this crouch position just a little bit longer. And I can do that by moving this frame closer, so the values get closer to a purple or a blue. That will really help sell that there's a snap between these frames. Wanted this to feel even more snappier, what I can do is actually grab all of these keys on this final frame, copy them, and carry them over for another 2 frames, so it will be holding for 4 frames as opposed to 2. And then I can use this mid pose or this mid frame as kind of like a semi-settle pose, which will just push things a little bit further around. Can use it as a little bit more of a lead up to get this curve into this instead of a linear action, so it feels like he's actually easing off. You always want to focus on your core action opposed to like your limbs and stuff, especially this early on. And then you can start focusing on getting like stronger silhouettes. You can do the same thing for the feet, like if you wanted to have it so they really feel like they're snapping into position. Like, because currently I've got this really weird shape, so if I really wanted to push it early, I can get it so it's almost into those positions faster. This will help push the snap that I want to have in this section. Might also swap this to world axes instead of local, just so I have a little bit more control and I know what axes I'm moving along. It's worth swapping between axes depending on what you're doing. Especially when you've got multiple translate Y or X coordinates, or you want it to move linearly up, and you're currently got your local, so it's kind of in a weird position. Also trying to keep my volumes in the knees and legs feeling correct. Also might want to drop this down a little bit more, just so that arc's a little bit more subtle. Currently I also have this weird little bounce in here, which doesn't detract from it too much, but feels out of place. So I'm probably just going to tidy that up. Because we know we also want to get up to this pose. I want him to use that leg, so where does he end up there? Bop. Yeah, so I'll just copy this key over to the one opposing it, just so I think that lines up better with that foot. It's not going to be perfect because of that position there, but I can drag it over. This is going to start defining where my arcs and stuff are, specifically for this action. Don't really want it to be directly up. I do want it to have a little bit more angled velocity. So I'm just going to give that a little bit more of a push that way. I find doing this in, you know, little breakdown steps like this really useful. Just understanding, you know, I just want to get that primary motion going before I continue. Only downside with this type of workflow is you will be swapping to stepped every time you do a couple of keyframe changes. So that's starting to get a little bit closer to where I want it to be. Not quite with that this up here. At that pose there. Might start bringing that foot up earlier just to compensate the... Yeah, that's definitely a nicer pose. kind of want to just keep the consistency that I've been building up earlier with like making sure this is on 2s. I do also have to bring a frame in between these two. Mostly because the torso is doing what it needs to be. Like that line is nice, but we also need to see that push off. Because at the moment it still reads a little bit weak without that secondary or tertiary pose. So what I'll do is I'll actually start it from the squat position. Whoa. Actually, I'm going to do a dirtier method. I'm going to copy keyframe, make sure both have keyframes. Select all of them. Go keys, or tangents, sorry. And then do just auto tangents. I should kind of that pose. Try to lean either one way or the other. If you have a tweener or along the likes, you can do that, which will basically do what I'm doing, but automated. So Animbot does have a tweening function like that. Or you can just manually scrub, find a key that's just closer, generally one off either side of the next keyframe. Press S, key it. And I want to try to keep this leg, because it's the one that's actually pushing off, to be hyperextended for this frame. Which will generally either mean like completely extended or sometimes backwards. Not backwards as in like this, but like the joint can sometimes break, and knowing when to break a joint is useful for adding extra width to a scene. But I think we can get away with not having to do that on this one. You will notice that using Animbot, you will get some performance hit when you're using the motion trails, just because it's having to calculate all of the motion, and it's generally doing it in world space opposed to in camera. So. And it updates live opposed to the Maya one, which you have to manually update. Cool. Just going to shrink my timeline again, just so I'm only focusing on the element that matters. Just going to ignore what's happening up there at the moment. Now this could have a bit more build up and a little bit more hold frame. but it is overall getting closer to where it needs to be. Joys of working on twos also allows me that next time I want to go through this and I want to be a bit more, snap or anything else like that, I can decide that I just want to cut keys. So say right here, if I didn't need, say, that pose, I could literally just select everything that relates to that character, delete it, and then shove all of these other keys over. And it just increases your ability to make decisions with what frames actually work for the animation. And it's something you learn not to be, if you make a pose that you like, but it doesn't work within the scene, you have to learn to be a bit brutal with it and cut it. If it's all for timing, because timing is more important than a singular beautiful frame. I recommend actually looking up 2D animation stuff for some of the principles of animation, mostly because they are really useful for understanding timing and pacing, where to use squash and stretch. They're usually a little bit more dramatized, they're a little bit more drastic in how they display it, purely because the medium of 2D is a little bit more fluid, where 3D is a little bit more rigid, but the principles are very similar. What I'm doing is I'm just making sure that all my keys kind of bleed into each other or blend into each other, just because at the moment my curve's a little bit wonky. Now we're going to start defining this pose because it's muddy and I have no idea what it's trying to do. One thing I recommend is if you're starting animation, always check the rigs that you're using. Spend some time with it, either do something very simple on them, understand how they work, find any interesting controls that you might find in unusual spots which you haven't seen before. This rig has some funky controls on the wrists and stuff. you guys have any questions, always feel free to ask. I'm more than happy to answer them while I'm going through my process. Might actually push this a little bit further by giving some extra stretch onto this rig. So just, yep. You would mostly consider the method I'm using for this anim is keyframing with a hint of straight ahead. So the stuff that I'm doing at the moment is more straight ahead than it is keyframing. Where up here, yep, this is mostly doing keys. So, you know, where things should be within certain timings. Down here is a little bit more free-formed, and you'd find this a little bit more in flowy animation for 2D, where you would see a lot more of this stuff up here for fight sequences and stuff, because you need to have those direct key poses. It's also a very good guide for figuring out how long something should be. So now all I'm doing is watching the animation, just seeing how it flows. I do feel that the cycle could possibly be reduced a little bit more tight. But the overall motion so far is reading pretty okay. One thing to note is always try to go through your keys multiple times. Like if you're not sure if something's working, like take a step back, look at it, see what's feeling out of place. If something feels like it's not moving in the correct way, or you know the volume is being lost, the arc is being lost. See what you can do to like make it feel like it's flowing together. So now I've got this kind of first little jump sorted. I kind of want to focus on this bit up here, where he starts contacting the rock. So I'm going to just move this time slider across so I can just focus on a different element. So all this is just like where on the timeline I'm actually viewing, which is very useful if you just want to focus on elements. So I'm going to be coming from this key here to this key to this key. So I can probably cut this one out because it doesn't need to be there anymore. So this is a key that I want to move 2 over. So So I can make a spot in here. What this one is going to be doing is I'm going to grab this controller, move it out. This leg's going to still be out like that. This is just going to be giving anticipation that the character's about to contact the wall. One thing to note is always check your shoulders as well. It's very common for people to forget shoulders exist. I'm also going to add a little bit of stretch onto this one, because I want it to feel like he's really getting into contact this. Might even stretch the torso out a little bit. Make sure I'm putting those hands in the right spot instead of being a mile away. Because we also know the arc that this character should be coming up, I can actually use the line as a little bit of guide where I should be placing certain elements. Because I want his hand to kind of contact this as well, I'm gonna just extend all those fingers out with this. Getting some little preemptive hand posing could save you time later on. Because I just want to do... Nope. Just going to add some twist to that hand a little bit. Each rig will have a different setup on how they do hands, feet and stuff. So it's really good to look at your rigs before you start using them. Not much. Just doing a really cool little demo of character motion. Unintentional play blast. Whoops. Just trying to keep this hand pose that I made here because I kind of like it. Kind of want to see if I can reuse it. Only because I think that would look really nice with the little hand roll that we've got going up here. Let's see if I can get it so it looks just close enough. Also gonna just reduce the kill. That's getting a little bit closer to where it should be. Just do a little save just before Maya decides it probably wants to crash again. So this is what we've got so far. Let's have a look through our little idea cam. Oh yeah, Maya's already had a heart attack once today. Don't want to tempt it with another one. So that little jump sequence is getting there, slowly and surely. Be nice when we can start getting out to this end. But I think if we get to about this jump today, I'll be pretty happy. Yeah, this is a little bit just of a little demo for getting people into 3D and showing what it's all about. I think I might actually extend this just a little bit longer than I normally would, because I want this jump to feel like it's really got some energy into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make that key. Probably grab that one, move that one back. Yeah, just going to duplicate this one. Just because I wanted to feel like there's a little bit more settle into this landing. So when we go into our big jump, it really feels like he's pushing all of his weight into it. I'm also going to change that from... I'm going to really push him into this pose. Just like get his hips and his body really squished together. Because I want this jump to feel like he's really really forcing that energy through. If I was smarter, we probably would have done this in a different world space. I did not. I'm also going to copy these keys again for these hands, because I really like that pose. Might also add some roll to this, because this rig has roll available to it, so I'm going to take advantage of it. Technically, we've got some hands doing some movement that we shouldn't really be doing. It's a little bit better. Go swap that back to local, see if that's going to be a better movement option here. That's nicer. And then we go try to match that up with this one, because so what I might do, let's push this one back a little bit further this way, so when we get to this pose it really feels like we're getting ready for that jump again. So that way we force the momentum to feel like he's really getting bop and then bop. There's a couple of options you can do for this. Ultimately it's going to turn down to whatever feels right for your timing. Also going to just roll this even more than I did previously. They almost lift off, just because his elbow is going to be in a really awkward position if I don't. Gonna go back to world. Not really liking how this hand is actually lining up on this wall. I think Again, really should have changed the world orient to this. I think with some minor elbow adjustments, I think we can get something pretty close into this shot. Because we know we want him up here in this really strong, kind of cool, powerful pose, I'm going to take the advantage of like just anticipating that he's going to get into that. So he's not actually going to get that high up in the air on this one, but he's going to be high enough that you know he's about to go up. Because I really want that snap to remain in this shot. Also means that I will be using stretch on this one. Might even take this advantage to do a semi-reset on some of the controls. So he's no longer just a little bit stretchier than he should be. Sometimes using wireframe just to select controls that go into Geo is really useful. Using toes to roll to really emphasize that they're getting a push is also very helpful. And then just getting the hips to feel like they're extending in the right ways. Might also take this advantage to reset this hand, because the hand is currently in some really janky position. Taking advantage of when you're in air poses or using twos, it's really useful. So if you know when your character is going to be in the air, you can take that as an opportunity to reset some of the rotation values, just so you're not having to fight against things later on. I'm using the plus and minus on my keyboard to scale the control. That helps to select some of the smaller controls, as well as the larger it is, the less motion you get, and the smaller it is, the more motion you get from how far you're moving the mouse. So use that to an advantage if you only need minute motions on something, or if you need something to move, you know, a decent distance. And this is where we'll probably leave off for the day. Still some stuff to get going. I really think that extra pose hasn't actually added anything, unfortunately. So this is where being brutal for keyframes is useful. It's all about the motion, it's not about the pretty keyframe. But I'll probably, before the next week, I'll try to get everything to a very similar level of polish as this bit down here. So it'll still be not perfect, but close enough for a second pass. Then hopefully next week we might do some lightning effects with a cool rig that's down there that we haven't used yet. Hopefully we'll also be able to start doing some minor polish. Probably for the final week I'll do a little camera demo on how to come up with some interesting camera angles. What you can do with cameras to make some really cool little showreel pieces, as well as just like a really basic Maya lighting setup. So you're not just looking at grey on grey. But thank you for joining me today, and I'll catch you all next week.